try to navigate this space. So hello to Jenn Leavitt, Cindy Franks, Jane McEntee. Did I say that right, Jane? And Madison Horl. Jane is at Brown Brothers Harriman. Jenn is at State Street. Cindy is at Wellington Management. And Madison is at AllianceBernstein. So we're going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves, perhaps share your major in college, and briefly talk about your current role, what you do in that role. And then I'm going to ask the series of questions that I shared with the panelists, being mindful of the time. Students, if you have questions that you want to ask our panelists, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question. Or Cassie, if you could help me manage the chat, students could ask your questions in the chat. And panelists, you know, obviously we're not going to have enough time for all of you to answer every single question, but you know, if you have something to add to what one of the other panelists says, please feel free to join in. Without further ado, Jenn, if you could introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your major and what you do.
Sure. Hi, folks. My name is Jenn Levitt. I'm currently a vice president at State Street, and I oversee both our university relations function as well as our talent pipeline programs function. So it's a combined talent development and talent acquisition role. I've been at State Street for 4 years. I graduated from Holy Cross in 2009. I was a Spanish and psych double major. I was pretty involved in campus. Actually, before I came to State Street, I was in higher ed for a number of years and worked at Holy Cross after finishing my master's degree. So I was at Holy Cross for about 6 years before I joined State Street 4 years ago.
Thanks, Jenn. And how about you, Cindy?
Yes, my name's Cindy Franks, and my daughter Jenn was a 2020 grad. I'm with Wellington Management, so we're an asset management firm. I'm a BC double eagle, I've absolutely been thrilled with my daughter's education. Always a supporter of your children, but you know, I'm very enthusiastic about what education Holy Cross provides to you all. And I just think you just need some real life guidance and mentorship, and people could usher you through. My daughter has a brother. He went to Fairfield. Thank you. See that? I have my Holy Cross mom's mug. And you know, I can see the differences in the university. So I'm really grateful for Pam for having these kind of forums. I think they're really important, and I hope to be able to contribute. As far as career goings, I'm not very good. I really fell into HR. Started out at Channel 5 in Boston as a medical reporter, went into management consulting after my master's, and now, you know, I'm in HR. So a windy path, but I do think we all find our passion one way or another.
Great, thanks, Cindy. And Jane, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jane McEntee. I graduated from Holy Cross in 2006, which is just about 15 years ago, kind of crazy. I have actually been with BBH for actually almost 15 years. I started shortly after I graduated from Holy Cross and kind of fell into it. I worked on the business side for over 10 years, had some really great experience there, and then transitioned into HR just about 4.5 years ago. Right now, I'm overseeing recruitment for our private banking, investment management, and administration lines of business. Prior to that, I actually returned from maternity leave over the summer, and prior to that, I was actually supporting our service delivery function, which is a little bit more kind of focused on core operational services, which is like similar to Wellington and State Street for that matter. So I've obviously really enjoyed my time at BBH. Happy to kind of answer any questions people have about the recruitment process and what it looks like. I know this is kind of a challenging time to be entering the job market. So also curious to hear what others have said or have to say about what's happening in the industry. So looking forward to hearing from you all. Nice
Great.
to meet you.
Thanks, Jane. And Madison.
Yeah, hi Crusaders. I'm Madison Horl. I graduated Holy Cross in 2012, and I've been at AllianceBernstein for about 9 years now. I started as a summer intern in our private wealth management group, moved throughout the organization and landed in human capital and in campus recruiting about 2 years ago. I work for AllianceBernstein in campus recruiting, specifically focused on our investment teams. Most of our business has moved to Nashville, except for those investment teams. So I handle all of those, along with the sell side and our diversity programs as well. My role is kind of full life cycle recruiting. So everything from bringing, interacting with students on campus, then welcoming them to the firm. I'm the program manager for our summer internship program and help onboard the associates as well. So I like that. I get the opportunity to kind of follow our new joiners all the way through from when we first meet them to when we put them onto their teams. I'm excited to talk with all of you today, and I hope this is less of a back and forth question and answer and a lot more dialogue. So feel free to jump in, and if you have a question that is related to kind of what any of the panelists are answering, please chime in, because we'd love to hear from more of you. That's how these things are really successful.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So, and I'm going to just say, one of you jump in to answer the question. If no one jumps in, I'm just going to pick on one of the four of you to answer the question. So can someone just talk a little bit about the recruiting cycles for roles in finance? When do full-time and internship opportunities get posted? And when are candidates typically interviewed and ultimately hired? Jane or Cindy. Cindy.
Well, I was just going to say, I know well, and I wanted to add that I've been at Wellington 18 years. So my responsibilities is for talent and talent across the spectrum, not specifically the campus, but I do have a lot of involvement with it. To answer your question, I think that it may be different by firm. For us, campus recruiting, our jobs are posted. We have a business associate program, we have a client associate program, we have a technical associate program, and those programs for seniors, the application would open in late September, early October, and there's a very, very short window. So, you should be keeping your eye open if you're a rising senior come August, because that does fluctuate a little bit. We do have limited internships. A lot of them are diversity programs right now. And so if you're interested, there's a variety. So now would be a time to look at some of those. We have others that were posted in the summer. We are very active with TWIGO, MLT, some of those associations, and they also have different cycles. So I was very active with MLT this year, and that program was over the summer and into the fall. And I felt like our firm really, might have missed it, because there were a lot of investment banks that had already offered candidates internships back in March, April, May timeframe. And we were, we were talking to kids who had exploding deadlines, and they were just beginning to find out about our company. So I think it's important to sort of look at the websites, understand things. I think we have some great recruiting partners here on the call. They can give you guidance about their particular firms, but I think you can't get out early enough to understand if there's a company that you're interested in, to have that detail. And maybe it's something, Pam, that your organization can, track a little bit, but they are moving targets from my experience.
Thank you. Yeah, we do try and let students. So we try and let students know as much as we can what kind of by month, what kind of industries are their recruiting cycles. When I started at Holy Cross, and I've been at the college 18 years, it was always fall was full time. I guess mostly finance in the fall, and spring was internship recruiting. And over the years, it has morphed, and now it's a lot of them are in the fall for both full time and internships. And we usually say in our office anyway, fall is for finance across the board. So trying to let students know to be aware and starting to look for opportunities over the course of the summer, you know, that when those open in the fall. And I'm seeing Jenn nod, and Madison and Jane a little bit too. So your programs are also many in the fall.
Yeah, so I would say very similar to Wellington, like our full-time programs. They're completely recruited for before November 1st. The internship program, we start sourcing in September and we generally close the application window in November, but we'll start talking to candidates November, December, January. And that's really based on our business timeline. The one caveat I'll say for some of our full-time opportunities is if you miss the boat for the fall recruiting, we do just-in-time hiring, right? So if you're graduating in May and you still haven't found your job, anything that's posted April, May, June, we're looking for someone right then. So we don't do advanced hiring besides like our formal development program. But if you're still looking for a role in the springtime, that's when you start looking at the career pages to say like, okay, this role is open now. And then people will start considering you then.
Great, thank you. Madison or Jane, do you have anything to add? And I know
Yeah.
Jane's still having some trouble.
Yeah, for us, our internship recruiting is really the most of the recruiting that we do in the fall. We find that a lot of our interns convert to full-time associate roles. And then we, in the fall, are waiting to see kind of which of our interns haven't accepted yet. And then we'll open up our associate roles from there. So it pays to kind of be on our radar. But that being said, we just do limited associate recruiting overall. Internship recruiting, those jobs we post usually as soon as we're done doing summer programs. So that's usually end of August. We keep our applications open and kind of interview on a rolling basis. But I'd say the earlier you're in, the better. And we try to, you know, similarly to what Jenn mentioned, make all our offers usually before we leave for kind of like a Thanksgiving holiday, and anything lingering, we definitely try to get out of the way before Christmas time.
Great.
And I would say for Wellington, I definitely think there's some merit into keeping your eye on the websites because, you know, we hired at between 23, it's not a huge number, and 50 something associates in one or three of our programs every year. And sometimes those candidates do fall out. And so, you know, we will repost an opportunity. They can close really quickly. We also do, as Jenn mentioned, the judge. So if there's seniors on the call, don't worry. I mean, there are opportunities to get into full-time roles at a firm like ours, and I think other firms too. In the spring, we don't have as many early career roles because we're a smaller company with 2,700 employees globally as other companies. So the points of entry are different for us. But one of the things that I wanted to, you know, talk to the students about is don't be afraid to take a role that's a contract role, that's a temp role, that's potentially something that seems more administrative. Because once you have your foot in the door, especially at a small firm like ours, I think it's invaluable. The amount of resources you can have, temp or full-time, the access to information. We post all of our opportunities a week in advance inside the company before they're posted outside the company. We prefer to hire someone who's a little bit proven to us. So I know it sounds weird to say, oh my gosh, you know, I'm going to take a temp role, but we work with a couple of agencies really, really closely. And there's an opportunity if you want to support a portfolio manager in our firm in a more administrative capacity. It's really not an administrative capacity. Basically, what you're doing for them is a lot of analysis and modeling. It's an assistant role, really. And that gives you exposure that you would never have, the proximity to that investor, even in our business associate programs. It's probably a little bit more of an unknown, but you can definitely find your way that way too. And I know in an environment like this, it seems really scary because companies typically this year haven't hired at the volumes they've hired in the past, but that's definitely a route to consider. And there are some good firms in wherever you're located that will have those opportunities.
Great. And that's a great segue to my next question too is, we all know finance is a very competitive industry, and all of the firms that you represent are very competitive, and you have thousands and thousands of applicants. How can or should students differentiate themselves? How can they differentiate themselves in the process so that you will hopefully select them for an interview? What can they do? Madison?
Yeah, I think, during programs like this, getting to know students is really high on my list of ways of sourcing great candidates. Having seen you be an active participant in events like this is a huge piece of it. Networking and leveraging a connection that we might already have, either a friend from Holy Cross, or if you see something on my LinkedIn that kind of speaks to you, then, reach out, but have it be around something in particular. That's always helpful, and that will kind of differentiate you from everyone who reaches out. I mean, I'm always going to respond to a Crusader. That's, I guess, just your name and seeing that you're from Holy Cross is going to certainly motivate me to respond to candidates. But, asking a good question and not just saying like, what jobs do you have? But like reaching out for a specific reason, saying, hey, like really curious about this, or I'm having trouble navigating like this specific thing. That'll give me something to kind of answer for you, or something to like reply to. If you're just reaching out, like I've had students reach out, not necessarily from Holy Cross, but from other places, being like, what opportunities do you have? That doesn't really help me, and doesn't prove that you're going to be a good recruit either. It makes it seem like I'm going to have to hold your hand through the hallway. But if you find a way to kind of differentiate yourself in your initial reach out, I think that's going to motivate the recruiter to respond to you in the first place, and hopefully start a worthwhile conversation on both ends.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Anyone have anything to add, Jane?
Yeah, I would agree with Madison there. I have a great example. We had a candidate who wasn't eligible for intern program. I think he was only a freshman, wasn't from Holy Cross, so we had to decline him. But he did a really effective job at networking internally with BBH. And what he would do is I think every semester would reach out to me and just provide me with an update on what he's been doing. I think over the summer, he provided a quick kind of update on what his internship was and what he was doing and what he was learning. And it didn't require me to respond to him at all. There was no kind of expectation on his end that I would get back to him saying like, we're looking forward to having you join us in 2022 or whatever it might be. But it was a really kind of thoughtful way for him to continue to express his interest in BBH, and kind of remind me of his candidacy, so that when the time came, when we were actively recruiting for his actual intern class, we could keep him in mind and say, wow, look at how engaged he's been with us over the course of the last several years. So that was just it kind of stuck out to me as a really good way of thoughtfully networking and staying in touch with an organization.
So when students talk to me, and I'm trying to, encourage them to do the networking, and I will say the same thing that you have both just said. Students a lot of times say to me, well, isn't that kind of annoying? And I don't want to be, that person that's always reaching out. And I'm like, no, you do want to be that person. You want to remain relevant. You want to remain on their radar. And so I think it was Madison that you said, if they have some sort of point or question, it's helpful. But Jane, on the same, on the flip side, you said that student just was keeping you apprised of what he was doing. So both can be effective. But I think it's just important to stay on the radar of recruiters, and you aren't being a pain. This is what you want them to do, correct?
I agree with both, and I don't just oversee a campus. So I have literally thousands of pieces of mail that come to me at all levels of the organization. And I think it's the same rule of thumb. If you want to be a good candidate, come with something that we can do with it that makes you, remarkable or memorable. I think there's a cadence in which you can communicate. I love the quick update after a summer internship. For me, I would welcome anybody to reach out to me. I'll share my email at the end of this. And I will try to get you to the right place. And I encourage the team members to follow up as they can. I agree that by your participating in this event, the students that came to visit us at the firm last year when we could do that, that shows your interest. And we always say we appreciate your continued interest at any level. It may not be that you get the first job you apply for, but if you're professional about it, there is a chance we are going to have something at some point that works. So I do understand it is a scary task to think what's the balance, especially without the experience. But I think that if you have a well-prepared note, that's really important. The other thing I would say, maybe I'm segueing, is that I think a candidate, whether they're sending a letter or preparing for an interview, has to do their homework. I think you need to understand the organization that you're reaching out to. Understand what we do. We're an investment management firm. We're an institutional firm. So for me, when someone says, what kind of funds do you have? Well, we do business a little differently. So I want them to understand the difference in what our business is, that this isn't a retail firm. Understand the role. So do your homework when you're reaching out to someone. It doesn't take too much. We all have these amazing websites. Every one of the panel members is with an outstanding company. You really can't go wrong. But do your homework and send a letter and have proper grammar and no typos, because that really is a quick knockout factor, whether you're doing that in your communication to reach out to network or even these applications. I mean, we had 78% error rate in applications this year. And it's not that our instructions were hard. An error is someone who is just a little less thoughtful in how they prepared their documentation.
Okay, great, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about if a student doesn't have relevant experience or what you would deem to be relevant experience, but they do have an interest, how can they communicate that to you so that you would consider them for a role? Jen, we haven't heard from you recently.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things. Like, we don't expect that much of college students, right? Like, it's great if you have leadership experience or you've had a previous internship, like that's always going to stand out more to us. But at the end of the day, we always talk about State Street, like it's an apprenticeship business, right? You're learning from the people around you. So regardless of what skills you're coming with, we know we're going to be training you. And so I think talking about how, if it's on your resume, kind of demonstrating what you've done on campus, off campus, volunteering, kind of put yourself out there. And then when you're getting to the interview, have examples of how you've been had to be agile, or if you are doing anything with technology or data or analysis, being able to talk about those things because they're really transferable. And I think one thing that's really crucial that I talk about with candidates is the fact that you have a liberal arts degree is huge, because critical thinking skills are really essential in any role that you're doing. And so kind of having that background, being able to talk about it, I'm more likely going to go to a candidate who has that and maybe has the aptitude to be a continuous learner and say, you know what, I didn't know how to do a regression analysis and I wasn't being taught it in my class, but I was able to go and on, I don't know if you guys are still using lynda.com, but or some sort of online career portal where you're kind of learning skills, using stuff like that is really useful, because I'm sure all the other companies as well, we have an internal learning site where folks can really seek out lots of different trainings, so really help you in your role or just kind of furthering your career. So demonstrate that you're willing to kind of put in the time and energy outside of what you're being trained on is really huge.
And I think you're coming with a liberal arts degree and you might apply to an investment management firm, but you might not apply to an investment role, right? So you could be in marketing, you could be in HR. So all of your degrees and your experience, and you guys have a great experiential learning program. But I think just showing passion for the industry, like I'm really curious and asking good questions. And, you know, even if you don't know a lot about asset management, read a little bit about what we're doing, and just have some really good questions to show that you're interested. For those who are interested in finance or investments, we're going to ask about what's going on in the markets. And that's a natural question. That's just basically listening to the TV or picking up the paper and asking if they might have some ideas about that. Just leaning in a little bit to, you know, having an interest in the topic, either on a functional basis or in an industry basis.
And I might be speaking on behalf of some of the other panelists, but one thing that, especially for entry-level students, when I was recruiting for them, I always, I liked when candidates didn't necessarily always come in with an internship in finance. If they like worked at a grocery store over the summer or at a golf course, to me, a lot of the kind of skills and competencies that you develop from really hard work and putting in the time and kind of getting your hands dirty translate really well into some of these entry-level roles. I won't, like, it's entry-level positions sometimes are not glamorous, and so having an appreciation for what goes into them, I think tends to make a really successful candidate. So don't downplay any of those experiences that you don't find or that you don't see as relevant, because they can translate really, really well into some roles.
Our very first business associate hire 5 years ago was actually a candidate from another university who worked at a grocery store in the morning, and after school went to a grocery store, drove 40 miles to go to school. He went to Bentley, and he was a technology major, and he became an investment associate because he had that rigor and he was curious and he asked really good questions.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about, and I know you all, you know, recruiting for a lot of different roles, but kind of in general, what are some of the skills that you are looking for? I think Jane, you mentioned, I think it was Jane, you mentioned critical thinking, or maybe that was Jen. What other skills are you looking for an entry-level hire?
For us, I think there's a real focus on teamwork. A lot of the groups that people come into, you're working in a group of 15 to 20. So being able to effectively work within a group is a big piece of it. Adaptability, so adjusting to shifting priorities is huge. Really strong client service skills, communication. I would say those are some of the more kind of core competencies that we would focus on when looking at entry-level candidates.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I would echo that. And one thing that comes up a lot, especially so my team manages the hiring and the program management of our development program. And one thing we look for in candidates is folks who are humble. I think a lot of folks have talked about this on the call about being willing to put in the hard work. As far as I'm concerned, nobody is above doing the administrative work at State Street. Like our senior vice presidents and executive vice presidents schedule their own meetings sometimes. So like sure they have admins, but sometimes you have to do kind of that stuff. And I can tell you like right off the bat, it's really clear and it comes off on interviews if people are kind of being fake and expect things to be, you know, they expect to be able to walk into the CEO's office on the first day because they're part of this elite program. It's really, really important to be humble, especially in like, I think throughout your career, but especially in an entry-level role.
I could not agree more.
I think that's what makes the Holy Cross students a great candidate. For us, independence and being able to work independently, trying to take initiative is important. For some of the harder skills, we do like someone with analytical ability. In investment management, I have been, you know, helping actually universities combine some programs for to study asset management with technology. So learning how to program. I think those skills are going to be used in everything. We're using them in our client-facing teams. We're using them in our investment organizations. I think every firm is building up their AI capabilities, and it's really an edge for early career students. and applicants.
And the final thing that I'll add here, which I think is something that Holy Cross taught me, is just a sense of intellectual curiosity, not taking the first answer as the right answer all the time, but really digging in and figuring out, what are going to be other approaches to getting to an answer for this same question. And as an investor and coming from an investment management firm, we're always trying to uncover different ways of solving a problem, different types of investments that can help our clients, achieve better investment outcomes. So we're looking for those people that are ready to kind of uncover things. And part of finding those things is intellectual curiosity.
And we agree, we completely agree. And we would rather have you ask a question that might, than not ask a question. So there's no silly questions in interviews.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about, I know we're all tired of our current COVID situation, and it's affected all of us in a variety of ways. But can you talk a little bit specifically about how it's affected your jobs, hiring, and how students can, hopefully persevere? Like what can they do to remain positive during these challenging times, and some words of hope for them, I guess.
Well, I hope you like working remotely. I think a lot of companies are really rethinking about how their organizations get work done. We're based in Boston. We spend a lot of money on real estate for our offices. And so it's really easy to save money if not everyone's coming into the office. We haven't made final decisions on, who's coming back or when, but I do think that it's going to change a lot of work in general. And so being able to work remotely is huge, and figuring out how you develop relationships remotely is very different than, if you can walk by someone's desk. So it's really important to figure out how to do that, how to build those, whether you have an internship or you're working, just kind of figuring out like how to get to know people virtually is really important. So yeah, I don't think things will change. Like different industries obviously are going to be very different. But kind of be prepared for that. I know we've had conversations of, do we totally change our professional development program and say it is remote? And that way it opens up the doors of types of candidates we can actually bring in the door, because we're not bringing folks to Boston. And does that change what the experience is like? So everyone's really thinking about it now because we've had to. I think it's good because I get to manage a global program. And so we've been really limited in some of the locations that we can operate. And now it's really opening what we can do and who we can kind of have as part of our program. So there's definitely a light at the end of the tunnel, but I don't think it will ever go back to the way many of us are used to.
Jen, can you talk a little bit about how how State Street is able to talk with candidates about the culture of State Street, since you aren't physically together, and how, if a student is on an interview, how can they ask questions about culture when we are working remotely these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important just even to be really blunt and ask that question of what has it been like? I think what we started to talk about, and what I talked about during our fall cycle, is we're a company of 40,000 full-time employees globally, plus another some odd 40,000 contractors. So we're huge. And as you might imagine, that creates a lot of communication challenges. With that said, with COVID, we got really, really good at communicating. And so managers who maybe didn't hold team meetings regularly were holding meetings weekly. People really knew what was going on in the organization. And a lot of stuff happened. We launched a platform to kind of give high fives, like virtual high fives to people, but little things. And you can see that there is this ethic of care for your colleagues that has really been amplified because of the environment that we're working in now. People are a lot more understanding, especially with people's different living situations or family situations. And so kind of asking those questions of like how the company has responded, like what the experience has been for the person you're talking to. And then I think, I know we're putting a lot of stuff out there, I think on our website and our LinkedIn pages about like how we're responding and what the culture is like. That's really huge. I think there are some companies out there that do a really good job talking about culture. Like HubSpot has this really, really, really awesome culture thing. So if you haven't looked at that, really look at that. But I would, ask the question, do the research on like the social media sites and their actual pages.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Jenn brings up a really good point, especially for candidates that are interviewing right now. Asking that question shows how truly innovative companies are, because they've had just this kind of less than 1 year window to figure it out. So asking that question of them now gives you a good awareness of, how much does a company truly care about its employees, and what has it done to display that care, like Jenn said, to demonstrate it to recruits. That's going to carry over no matter what work environment we work in. If we go back to the office, that care is going to continue, and to the extent that we are doing this for a little while longer, at least they have programming for you to step into as a new hire.
Yeah, and I would chime in that I feel is that I agree with everything everyone has said. I feel as a company and a culture, we've actually gotten stronger and perhaps closer. At Wellington, we've had one of our best recruiting years ever. And I think it's because through technology, oddly enough, there's an intimacy that you gain when you talk to the candidate. We're in your rooms, you're in our homes. Things like that never would happen before. Some of the electronics, and I've been on a number of networking programs. MLT was one that comes to mind. I don't know if anyone worked with MLT this year, but they have a tool called Shindig. It was terrible. It was honestly terrible, but it was incredible because the technology actually brought us together and got people to know each other because we were all trying to manage. So I think there's funny ways that, being honest and humble, that's that word again. And you will see that, everybody's trying to figure it out together. And I think companies, all the ones represented here today, have done a wonderful job of doing that. I think you can also ask about not just what have you done to respond to COVID, but what are you doing in this environment about, social justice? What are your ESG policies? Because you can understand what's important to a company by the programs that they have. What are some of the ERGs, or they're called employee resource groups, or business networks that you have for me as a young professional coming into the company? How am I going to be mentored? We have a mentor program, an allied program. So just say, what are those programs? And then just keep digging deeper. Every one of our interviewers in our firm goes through an interview strategy session before they interview. We train our interviewers to ask questions in different ways. And one of the ways they're going to be digging for you is to, dig down a little bit to try to get to different layers. You can do the same thing with your question. It's reverse engineer it and ask questions. How did the program come about? Who gets involved? You'll know whether it's a top-down initiative or it's just, young folks talking to young folks. Who's the mentorship and support? So I think there's some of the foundation to ask those questions can be found on people's websites. You have to hunt and peck. And I say that because I'm with probably one of the most private companies in the world. It wasn't until 2 years ago that we were even permitted to go on LinkedIn. So, we're expanding. This has been a growth opportunity for us to learn that social media isn't a bad thing. We've learned it from a lot of our young professionals, actually. So I think it goes back to what Madison said about that natural curiosity. Just be interested and engaged.
Awesome, thank you. I didn't prep you guys for this question, but it just popped into my mind, and so don't hate me for it. Can you each share what your favorite interview question is, if you have a favorite, one of your top 5 favorite interview questions for students, and maybe the why behind why you ask it?
I like to ask a candidate, like how their former manager and how their former colleagues would describe them, it gives a pretty good indication of like their own self-awareness, and if they're open to feedback, because that's really, really important kind of getting into your career. And like, you know, if they can say like, this person would say that like, I'm really bad at communicating, but this is how they helped me or something like that. That's huge. It also allows them to maybe like relax a little bit and maybe joke a little bit about an experience they had in a previous work environment or internship experience.
Thank you.
I always like to ask, if you were assigned to the cubicle next to me, what would I notice is different from the way you work versus the way the way you might assume other people work? And I think that's an interesting one, because some people say, I'm really loud on the phone. I apologize in advance, but I'm really loud on the phone. And then some people will say, you know, I ask a lot of questions, but it's only because I care. Like you get kind of a little bit more of an intimate answer from people. And I think in an environment where we have a lot of like open floor plans and things like that, like you're going to have to sit next to people of all different seniority levels. So it's nice to kind of tap into that in the interview process.
I honestly can't think of one off the top of my head, but similar to what Jenn was saying, I do like questions that make people relax a little bit more, and you really get a better understanding of who they are as a person. Will they fit in from a cultural perspective? So anything that might kind of allow someone to just kind of take a deep breath and tell them a little bit more about yourself tends to go a long way for me. So I like those types of questions.
Yeah, and I suppose for me, maybe it's the mom in me, but I want to really know about a person. I want to know where they grew up, what's their background. I want to know what they're proud of. I mean, I know they've worked really hard in school. Sometimes I want to know what are things that haven't gone so well and what would you do about them now? And they don't have to be a work-related thing. It's just to show that they were, you know, cognizant that something didn't go well and that they can always improve. But our firm is very interested in getting to know the individual, especially early career, even before we dive into the skill.
Thank you. It's 4:45 right now. We do have until 5. I want to give students an opportunity. If you have questions to ask our esteemed panelists, please either write it in the chat or turn off your microphone or turn on your microphone and go ahead and shout out the question. You have these 4 women here who are recruiters, talent acquisition. This is the time to pick their brains. I have great questions, but I know you do too. Fiona.
I think it was Cindy who said this, who had mentioned that like 70% of your applicants are kicked out just because of grammatical errors and typos. So what's then the next round of sorting? Do you go for grades? Do you go for, you know, background? You guys had said that sometimes internships experience isn't all that. So what's the formula?
So for me, I don't think we necessarily kick candidates out. We realize that, you know, people do make mistakes. I'm just saying it's better not to have those typos and to follow the instructions. On some of these campus programs and way beyond the 4 of us, there are specific instructions. And sometimes there's even, you know, technology tools that will sort on experience. We happen to do it all by hand, thousands and thousands of resumes by hand. But I would say paying attention to the detail, answer the questions because there are sorting fields that they look at. GPA for us is not a driving factor, but I think it's a demonstration of how hard you've worked at school. We tend to like to see coursework and areas of interest. We like to see some service in there. Athletes, but not all just athletic ability. We think that athletes, you know, learn a lot when it comes to teamwork. So it's really that well-rounded candidate. But I think for people who have not had the experiential learning, that if you have a few lines of relevant coursework to a role which you're applying, it helps us sort a little bit.
Great question, Fiona. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a good
Thank
question.
you.
What other questions do you all have?
See one question in the chat around, do you have any advice on AI questionnaires if your company uses those?
I don't have a lot of experience with the AI. I've heard about it from some of our campus team. That, you know, wouldn't it be easier if we had something to sort? I actually like for us to go through the resume.
Do any of your firms use the higher view or a reasonable facsimile where students are, the first round is students just staring at a screen and answering questions with no person being there? Do you use those?
We're currently piloting it, but we don't like formally.
We only use it for our intern program. We just get like, I think close to 5,000 applications for 30 spots. So it's hard to filter through. But we haven't, and we've used it for some entry level positions, but I think we prefer the kind of personal nature of phone screening candidates.
Okay. And for Jane, for those 5,000 resumes that you get, is there a team that's viewing all 5,000 videos? How do you do that?
Yeah, and sorry, my daughter is growling in the back. So if you hear her, it's like a little gremlin. Okay. We will sort by class year. So we are only accepting, rising juniors? Is that right?
Seniors,
rising
seniors.
Rising seniors, okay. And we would sort by GPA as well as a factor in that. And then from there, it really is, we do our best to sort through as many as we can, but it's really challenging.
Yeah.
For us, we really lean into the business to help us. So we probably get, I forget this year, I think we had 8,200 applications for 23 spots. So the first screen would be, there's a number of programs you can apply to, and our Canvas team tries to get through what's a viable resume and what's not. I mean, making sure that and we would be looking for those rising seniors come August. For the internships, we definitely look at the juniors and even some of the sophomores, and we'd love to talk to the freshmen because we think earlier is better, right? If you want informational, just let us know. Because we love that interest. We're actually getting into the high school level for having, some presentations by our investors. But once we get through that first sort, so we send basically books. It's a very old school. This year was electronic books of resumes to the business. And the business is probably a panel of 5 people that sort and pick. And it's their job to sort and pick for their own function based on where the candidate has indicated their first 3 preferences, I think. And so that really takes a lot off us. And then we, bring that back in. We do some initial screens, have a super day, which is a lot more fun in person than on video.
I'm curious, when the teams are looking at the candidates that have applied and have rated, top 3 choices, do you think the tendency is for those teams to be looking for candidates that are like them, or looking for a more diverse pool? And diversity meaning all types of diversity of thought.
So it's a diverse panel, first of all. So that it might be the generalist for the function, and it might be the recruiter within the function. It might be a couple of business leads or a hiring manager. I think we've done a great job when we talk about diversity at our firm. It's not just ethnic and cultural diversity, it's diversity of background. So we're looking for the natural curiosity. We're looking for someone who said, they've written this great paper, or they've presented at your scientific symposium. I know that's this huge standout on the Holy Cross programs. You know, you have, I forget what it's called. I've attended one or two in the fall, the beginning of the fall. I think it's maybe more of a scientific, but it's where people
research symposium.
Yes, talk about the research that they did during the summer programs. That's great. That seems to get a lot of attention. Just the topics in general, whether they presented or not. Some interesting things. Have they, you know, they're a marketing major, but they did this really cool archaeology research experience, digging up fossils, like things like that. A little bit out of the box is what we tend to gravitate towards.
Great, thank you, thank you. Students, any other questions?
Yep, I have another from McKenna Best, who's class of 23. Outside of being your internships and job positions being posted on the company website, are there any other platforms or websites that you use or that we should be looking for?
We post everything on Handshake.
Yes, thank you.
It's easy. It's much easier for us. And that would be all those temp roles, hopefully, those roles that are coming up in the spring, if internships or jobs have fallen apart, you know, when you're looking at the last minute, anything current, early career should be on Handshake.
I was gonna say most sites like LinkedIn or Indeed will scrape companies' websites like career pages. So most of the time it's gonna direct you back to our careers page anyway. So like you may see something on LinkedIn and it actually might be outdated. So it's always best just to go to the career page anyway. So we'll post on Handshake for like more of our programmatic stuff, but we have just so many jobs. We don't post everything by any means. So if you see something on LinkedIn, it's going to direct you back to our careers page. There are some companies that you can apply directly through LinkedIn and they have just like a different service or whatever. But like usually if you find it somewhere, it's going to be scraped like on every other kind of career site as well.
So one thing I just want to interject here, because my role at the college is in the Center for Career Development, working, I am the Director of Employer Engagement, and I'm consistently reaching out to companies, asking them to post positions on Handshake. There are many employers that don't need to do that because they are depending on, you know, they're doing it on LinkedIn, or they're just assuming students are going to go to their website. So my plea to you all as students is to never just look at one source. You should be casting a very wide net. You should be looking on Handshake. You should be looking on LinkedIn. You should be looking on Indeed. But if you have a particular interest in a company, then you should be visiting their website on a regular basis and going to their career page and knowing exactly when they post a new role. And then you should be looking for any alumni who are at those companies and reaching out to them. Like, you can't depend on everything to be in one spot. I mean, it would be wonderful if it could be, but it won't be. So you have to do some work on this search. It's your search. So you need to, you know, put the time in. I said earlier today, kind of look at it as a fifth class. You're going to be more successful the more work you put into it, the more time you put into it. So I do, it's 4:56. I would like to ask Jenn, Cindy, Jane, and Madison for any final pearls of wisdom, any final tips that you have for our students who are listening today, and any who might be listening to the recording at a later date.
Mine is always to be as prepared as possible. If you're going to have a networking conversation, you're going to have a conversation with a campus program, prepare. Know who you're talking to, know what they do. You know, I think all of us in talent acquisition are understand that you can't know the universe, but if you're talking to someone's dad about what they do, Google away, research, ask somebody, ask a professor, what is a risk manager? because I think it just shows a level of preparation and a natural curiosity.
Cindy, I just have to say, so my husband has always said to me, Pam, whenever you're talking to students, just tell them to prepare. Tell them to know what I do. Tell them to know what my company does. He said it turns me off completely, and I want to just end the interview if the person I'm interviewing has no idea what I do or what my company does. So
it will separate,
yeah,
because we talk to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you will see if you're going to the networking thing, there's a lot of Wellington people who we thought we'd have nobody who wanted to jump in, right? Everybody wants to help you. You are incredibly gifted students. We just can't say enough. But these little tidbits about attention to detail and preparation will really set you apart. You would be so surprised. Sometimes the littlest things that make the biggest difference. An impression, not necessarily with us, but with people we've set up exploratory conversations with, like they didn't know, thought we did ETFs. That is such a hard nuance of our industry, but it's just a little misstep can be a big difference. And it's not to make you more nervous, but this is an industry in which you need to be prepared.
Thank you.
I would say just use your network. I was so hesitant and resistant to leveraging like my own personal network and professional network and also the Holy Cross network because I didn't want to get a job because of somebody. And I think it's really, really important. Like when you can leverage that network for referral, all of our referrals get flagged in our system and they get an automatic review. And so it doesn't mean you get the job. It just means you're guaranteed to have your resume looked at. Or you might get an informational. And I think that stuff is really, really important, especially in this job market. So use your network, use your Holy Cross network. I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, networking is not a dirty word.
It's a gift.
One thing I'd add is craft your story, right? Help us to kind of pre-experience what it would be like to have you working with us. Doesn't necessarily mean having absolutely relevant work experience. I just want to know what you're like as a worker and what you're like as a person. And like Cindy said earlier, like what makes you tick? What are you proud of? Incorporate all of that into kind of like your candidate elevator pitch so that when I'm speaking with you, your passion comes through. I'm not trying to hire the person that looks the best on Zoom. I'm not looking for a model or an actor, an actress. I'm looking for a real person who I want to work with. So try to do your best to make that like real you come across.
I mean, all great advice, and I would echo what everyone said so far. I would also add that relationship building is really key, and that I think probably goes back to building a good network of people around you. But again, just being really thoughtful in your communication and kind to people it really goes a long way. If you're a good person, you will do well in any of these roles. And I think a big piece of that is just kind of building a group of people around you that can support you along the way. Ultimately, I think that relationship building is what progresses you in your career. And so starting off with that, I think is a really good place to kind of kick things off.
Thank you. And Jen, you said you resisted using the network, and I talk with a lot of students, and a lot of them feel the same way. And I keep on saying to them, they're not going to get you the job. They might just get your resume seen, or they might potentially help get you the interview, but then it's all on you. You've got to show up your best self for the interview in order to get the job. So it's just helping, that network is just helping a little bit. And I might add that I've worked at a couple of different colleges. I've been at Holy Cross for 18 years, but hands down, the Holy Cross network is beyond anything any other school. So alumni truly want to help you. So let them help you, but you got to tell them, you have to ask them, you have to let them know what you need from them.
And I would say one parting thing for me, I know it's been a really tough year. I thought it was really tough to have 2 graduates try to find jobs in COVID. I've seen them go through enormous challenges of being a new employee remotely. because managers didn't know how to interact with them. And to Jen's point, they didn't know, I call it the drive-by, the ability to ask a question quickly when someone's walking by. Now it has to turn into this whole formal process of, does it become an email or a Zoom, what does it become? I just have a simple question. I think people are beginning to understand the challenges for earlier career. And I think that's going to make, when you get your job, your experience better. I think we're thinking more about what that experience is like when you put your foot in our door, virtually or not. I think people want to help. I think virtual creates an opportunity where it might not, when people would be driving home at this time and they couldn't make the time because they're trying to switch and stick your kids in one room. There's a lot of silver linings too. You have an amazing school. You have a terrific alumni. Everybody wants to help. So don't feel lost. I'll give Pam and Cassie permission if you'd like to share my email. I'm very happy to, create the relationships with our campus team. As Pam and Professor Chuno, I really think that the best education is a liberal arts education. I think you all have the cultural attributes. I think Holy Cross screened you way before we had to screen you. And so we want to help, and I'm not alone. The four of us are not alone. There's a lot of people that we can also, I have a network of recruiters in other firms. I have a network of agency recruiters who will work with you to place you. As a parent, the one thing we want is for our kids to have jobs after graduation. And so that's a marketing tool for the school. It speaks to the school. So, we're willing to help. So please ask us.
Fantastic. You guys nailed it. I couldn't have been happier. When Cassie and I and Professor Chu were talking about what we could do differently this year because we're virtual, and I came up with this idea and then found you all and yes, I think
this is better than last year.
Oh, we had some great food at Wellington last year, I will say.
We did. We have a really cool space. Everybody has a beautiful space.
Yeah.
But I think we can pull it together, make do, and still have the same impact. And perhaps, I think the networking will be very important too. I'm happy. I'm happy to go class by class if I have to, because I think the students have worked hard, and this is what they're looking for. I've been very fortunate with my kids, and I think, I know the amount of work that everyone has put in for their educations. And I do think when we're talking about the types of schools, and I won't mention any, but I think that humility that you have in your everyday classroom and through your, friends and teachers, it comes through.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jen, Cindy, Jane, Madison. I am very appreciative of you taking time out of your day to help our students. And I do think this was informative. Students, please, link with these 3 alumni, this one parent, follow up via email. They mean it when they say that they will talk to you. And we shall see you. Cassie, what time is the session tomorrow, the first one?
We start at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.